Well, to respect everyone's time, we're going to get started. So, welcome to Donor Database Experts monthly webinar. We're so glad that you're joining us and taking time out of your busy day. And this month's topic is building a smart event using data. We sort of compared it to the Moneyball strategy, where you don't often think about data as what drives your events, but you really should. And that's what we are going to talk about. If you remember the movie Moneyball, it was the idea that using data to select a baseball team was absolutely revolutionary. People scoffed at it, turned out to be the thing to do. Um, so that is our mission for today, is to convert you to absolute event data junkies. So I'm joined by two wonderful, wonderful panelists. First of all, I am Marlisa Post. I am a database specialist with Donor Database Experts, and I've been with the firm for coming up on 5 years. And I have over 30 years experience in fundraising, doing everything from events, annual giving, overseeing databases, marketing, volunteers. I think you name it, I did it. But I'm joined by the wonderful Bridget Martin, who is come back to join us again. And Bridget is a passionate leader dedicated to building connections and driving meaningful change. As Director of Development at the Child Advocacy Center of Greater Rochester, she leads fundraising efforts to support children and families in need. With over 2 decades of experience in nonprofit leadership, finance, and business development, Bridget has excelled in strategic partnerships and community engagement. She has held key roles at Monroe Capital Inc., Genesee Regional Bank, and Dollinger Travel. Also a dedicated volunteer, she supports organizations like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and Ronald McDonald House. Her leadership earned her recognition as a 2019 Athena Award finalist, and Bridget thrives on collaboration and believes in the power of relationships to create lasting impact. So welcome, Bridget. Thank you for coming back.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we're also joined by my teammate, Kelly Menna. And Kelly is the events manager and database associate at Donor Database Experts, where she serves as the tactical brain behind the fundraising curtain. With nearly 5 years of experience, Kelly specializes in the financial and operational infrastructure of large-scale events, managing the end-to-end data lifecycle from initial registration setup to the final tax acknowledgments. A power user of Greater Giving, Donor Perfect, and Razor's Edge, Kelly's expertise lies in the critical last mile of fundraising, managing the on-site check-in and out, processing silent auctions and mission moments, and executing meticulous post-event financial audits. With a metamorphical Black belt in database management, she oversaw the processing and reconciliation of over 4 million in donations last year alone. Kelly is the person who ensures that when a donor raises a paddle, the money and the data actually finds its way home. So thank you, Kelly, for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
All right, so let's get right into it. We often hear that a smart data strategy starts months before the first ticket is sold. And I think that's something people forget about. I think they think a couple months out, start thinking about, your invitation design or where are you going to have the event. But really, it's the data that you should be thinking about. So, what do you feel? And Bridget, I'm going to start with you. What are the big three data points that organizations should decide on before they even open registration?
I think you have to make sure that the health of your database is in good shape before you even think about launching. And that is really making sure like any duplicate emails, like all of those kind of like minute things, which seem minute, are taken care of, so that when you are pulling the lists and you're doing what you need to launch the event, you've got clean data. And the other thing I would really make sure of is your coding, to make sure that you have things set up in the database coded the way that you want them so that the third point, which is the ease in reporting and getting what you need after the event, or sometimes during it, that's really simple. So to me, it's those three things are the keys prior to the event to set you up for success.
Great. And Kelly, what would your big three be?
I agree with Bridget about the duplicate emails, those type of things, duplicate names. You don't want to send an invitation to the same person twice. So those types of things. And also, I know nobody wants to talk about the end of the event before it even starts, but I think making sure that you have a good plan in place for that post event. If your event's on Saturday, what does Monday look like? How are you going to make sure that everything gets where it needs to be, is tied out? What are we going to say right afterwards? Again, nobody wants to talk about it before you've even gotten there, but I think that's probably the big things before you start to think about.
Great. And so how, Kelly, we'll start with you this time. How would you define a successful event beyond just the dollar amount raised on the night of? What are some other metrics that can tell you that this event was successful and worth having?
I think if you're doing, like, let's say you're doing multiple events in a year, if they come back for the next one, if you're doing one in May and then they come back for the one in November, if you're doing a golf tournament in the summer and they come to your gala in the spring, that kind of shows that they are interested and that they enjoyed themselves. I know that when I'm doing checkout, and it's not so much a metric, but it's what are people gushing about as they're leaving? Oh, I loved this. I loved that. This was gorgeous. We had so much fun. I love talking to this person. What do they talk about to the stranger at checkout? What are they saying to me on their way out that I relay back to the event client and tell them, like, Bridget, they loved X, Y, and Z. That's what I like to tell back.
Wonderful. And how about for you, Bridget? What else defines a successful event?
I do think it has a little bit to do, it sounds cliche, but the vibe. Like, how engaged are people and how excited are they? And equally important, how much did they understand what you were trying to relay to them? Do they know more about your mission from the time that they walked into the event to the time they left? And if they didn't, that's a strong takeaway that if you hear people walking out like, oh, this was fun, but what were we here for? Like, that's never what you want to hear. So I think it can also be different for each event. So like at a gala, you might want to be listening to what did people say about the speaker? Like, was there an impact? Was there that moment? Whereas golf, if you don't have that program, you might be just listening for different things. So I think the takeaways for me, obviously we all want to raise money, but it's equally important for the educational piece and the people walking away talking positively about your event and your organization.
Mhm. I think we often forget that beyond being a fundraiser, we hope that these events are friend-raisers and, bring I'll say the drag-alongs sort of into the fold and, they become, part of the family. I think that's always a wonderful thing to see. So one thing that happens for a lot of people, and I think especially Razor's Edge users, because while the Razor's Edge events module is a strong one, one of its weak points is certainly around not being able to handle silent auction, live auction, paddle raise in the moment. So this means that a lot of us then have to use multiple platforms. So Kelly, I'm going to start with you again on this one because this is one of your areas of expertise. So if you need to use multiple platforms, but ultimately will be hopefully integrating your data and not leaving it just floating around in a cloud, how do you determine which system should serve as the source of truth for guests versus gift data?
So I would say, leading up to the event, making sure that if you're going to be managing both, you have to kind of decide if you are going to try to manage both at the exact same time. I know when I work with Bridget, we are working together, making sure everything is updated as we go. But for other event clients, we just put everything in after the event, and the event software serves as that single source of truth where everything lives, because that's what we're going to be using for checkout. That's what we're going to be using check in and check out. That's where everything lives. And it may just be easier to track it all in there. And then obviously making sure everything makes it into your big database. I know with Greater Giving specifically, that information only lasts for, I think, 7 years, and then they get rid of it. So making sure everything goes into your long-term repository, that's the most important part. But I think if you're a smaller, a one man show, one woman show, making sure that you, if it's easier just to maintain the event software, I would say just do the event software, and then you can put everything in after the fact.
Great. And Bridget, what about in your experience?
It's pretty much exactly what Kelly said. Like, for us, we do it concurrently. So we make sure, we have certain deadlines where we'll say, okay, we're going to pre-reconcile, we're going to reconcile, we're going to have a number on this date. It pretty much answering the first question that Kelly answered with, what do you do before? I think you need to know that also before, what database drives your information for the event and for your donors. So for us, we do it simultaneously.
Great. I'm sure that makes that Monday afterwards a little easier then. So Bridget, you actually just sort of mentioned this, but I'll start with you in case there's any others. What have you found? What are some processes like, simultaneously moving data into Razor's Edge or whatever your main CRM is, that can reduce the pain points when you're trying to manage two systems? So you just talk about that kind of simultaneous, parallel tracks, I'd say. Are there any other things you found that help with that?
Yeah, I think for Kelly and I, we'd like to agree on a day that the data is going to be set up in batches and going in. Amanda on my team is fantastic, and she works really well with Kelly and makes sure that those things are all lined up. I think the other really important piece is, again, Amanda and Kelly work great together with our finance crew so that finance knows, like, okay, this is the date when we're doing pre-reconciliation. These are the dates when all the batches are coming in. So they can kind of see when the funds are coming in from Razor's Edge or whatever it is, they know exactly what to expect and when to expect it. So then even it moves into the marketing piece where you have your pre-reconciliation, your post, you have your number, when you're going to make announcements, when you're going to do your big post, when you're going to send your letter. So all of those things, just having that really buttoned up and understanding a good cadence with that. And if it's, if DDX is your partner in this, you're set up for success. And we have found that over the years, Kelly and I, my gosh, what'd we say? How many events? Over 20
Almost
we've done
20,
together.
yeah.
And I would say on this team is we've grown. Being able to do that with good data is the reason we've been able to grow. Like, we literally are coming off our, outside of a capital campaign year, our most successful gala in the history of this organization in 22 years. So that says a lot. And we were tied out 2 days after, I want to say. It was pretty impressive.
About, yeah.
I'm just going to say. Yeah. So I think it's just everybody on the same page, and please include finance in that and marketing.
I think that's really, before we jump over to you, Kelly, with the same question, but the fact that you strategically thought about, including finance in your planning is so important. I know I've worked at organizations where, that's definitely just an afterthought of, we need to get them that data, but not involving them in the conversations and doing it before the event even starts. I think that's really brilliant to be thinking about that. Kelly, how about you? What have you found that can reduce the pain points of the different organizations that we've worked with?
I agree with a lot of what Bridget said about making sure you have a plan, calendar dates on the calendar and stuff like that, and being really like transparent and structured in. I know a lot of things can change obviously with events and as you're going through it, but putting those like step by step, we're going to do this on this day and then we're going to do this, and making sure everybody knows like exactly this is the recipe for what we're doing and this is how you do it, and then we're going to have this beautiful event cake at the end, and making sure everybody knows what it looks like, and how do we get there. Because we do that with our other event clients where we kind of write down exactly, and I love talking about the end of an event before we even start. So what does the post event look like? What does that 7 to 14 days afterwards look like? And making sure that we have dates, even going as far as saying like end of business 12 p.m. type thing, of making sure exactly we know, holds me accountable, holds the clients, that they know what they're doing, so we know, and it helps a lot actually.
That's great. I know someone who's done events. I think so many of us think of the finish line that we are absolutely sprinting towards as like, 11 p.m. the night of the gala, or, when all the golfers have come in at the golf course, and then we get to work on Monday and we look around at the absolute hurricane that is our office, and the piles of data and things to be entered. It's like, ah, dang. So I think for you guys, kind of setting that finish line really where it should be, which is after everything has been buttoned up and gotten to finances, is so smart. And I think a lot of us, myself included, in the past have not always done that. So I think that's a brilliant thing to be talking about. And by the way, for those of us who have joined us, please ask questions. Our experts are here for you. So you do use the Q&A to be able to toss some questions in, and we will get Bridget and Kelly's thoughts. So next up, talk a little bit more, Kelly, about the necessity or reason behind using two different systems. I mentioned some of the limitations with Razor's Edge. What are some of the other reasons for that, or even expand on the kind of limitations of Razor's Edge?
It really comes down to what you're trying to accomplish with your event, what you're trying to do, and then making sure you find something that fits those needs. I'm a huge greater giving proponent. We all know that, and I'm a big fan. And so it depends. I think that they have a really good way of running pretty much every facet of the event. I know that there are some things that we all wish would be different with it, and that's when I join the dev team, I'll change it all. But right now I'm doing this. So but I think that there's a lot, you just need to make sure if you want to run a silent auction, thinking through exactly how that works. How do people bid? How do cards get charged? How does all of that connect? How does checkout work? How does the end of the event work? How do you pick up everything? So making sure that, if you are going to use one system, does it answer all of your questions? If it answers some of the questions, are the questions that are not answered, can you do something else with those? I don't want to be using 3 4 systems, but can this one solution solve for everything? And that's kind of what you need to think about. Exactly what are you trying to do, and then does this solve for all those things?
Without editorializing too much, can we talked about greater giving. Can you just maybe list off one or two other systems that you've seen that are some of our other clients use? I think Just Giving is one of them that I can think of.
Just Giving is a good one. I know, and I'm going to blank on the name of it. It is One Cause. I know people use One Cause, which I also think is good. Classy, Give Butter, those type of things as well. I know there's an add-on for Donor Perfect that's called Ready Set Auction. I think that one has some limitations, but if you use Donor Perfect, that may be another one to kind of add on to it. It's not any cheaper than Greater Giving, so that's just another trade-off, is looking at the pricing for it as well. It may integrate, but maybe it doesn't save you. What you save in money, you're not going to save in time.
Right. Yeah. Important to weigh those factors. Bridget, you obviously are at an organization where you've made that decision to use two different systems, so Razor's Edge and in this case, Greater Giving. Can you talk a little bit about on the organization side, kind of what drove making that choice?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot for any nonprofit, we're always looking at what is the best way for all the dollars that come in to go to the programs and services we provide, not to software and equipment. So what is the best use of our funds? And when we look at what our needs are, and if we're doing like some small dinner, can we use Razor's Edge to do that for an event and build a page? Sure. But if we're having a gala and you're having silent auction and you're having registration with table numbers and you need to sort the information, very much what you guys just said. A lot of fundraisers don't account for the time and money of their staff as an expense in their events. And if they were to do that, it may change how they do that. So we don't ever want to be in a situation where we've got staff spending 3 hours to do something that a software program is going to take 5 minutes to run a report, and you do the math on that and it works out. So I think it's just a matter of exactly what you started off with, Kelly, is like what do you need and what's the most cost effective way to get it.
Great. I have one more question sort of around the event software, and then we have a really great audience question. So how do you use that event software, whatever it is that you've settled on, to also enhance the guest experience as opposed to frustrating them? You know, if you're spending that extra money on a secondary software package, yeah, you would hope it'd be something that guests also find user-friendly. So, Bridget, how on your side, especially because you're the one who you know these donors, how do you use that event software to, make them come in happy and not wanting to throw a computer or a phone out the window?
Well, we want to avoid that at all costs. So we always want our donors to be happy. I think one of the first ways is when they check in, and if their information is accurate and we know their meal choices or whatever it is that their specifications are, that happens the second they walk in the door. And if they come in the door and go to poor Kelly and they don't have any of their information right, they're not going to be happy. So it's that. And the next part is really auction. Like, it is so easy for them to have in their phone and go through and be able to bid, and it doesn't take anything away from it. You can still have 10 people standing at the silent auction tables and they're fighting with each other about who's going to outbid the other one, even though it's on their phone. So you're not losing that engagement and the touch points that you want with donors. So I think it's really it's customer service, and it makes their experience better by having these two systems. One system on its own is great for certain things, and the other system on its own is great for certain things. And together it gives the donor the best experience, and it gives the fundraising team and the development team the best source forward for data retrieval and tracking.
Mhm. Great. And Kelly, what do you think around that?
I agree with what Bridget was saying. I think specifically about the auction. And the auction can be actually, it's really fun. It can be super frustrating sometimes with donors who, phone doesn't work, left it in the car, whatever. But and I'm not trying to sell greater giving, but there's a part of greater giving where you could use, it's called bid assistant. And I've seen so many people come up frustrated and a little disgruntled about, I can't figure this out. And I'm like, well, come with me. And I grab my laptop and I go out to the auction and I bid for them, and it turns them around entirely. And they, oh, thank you so much. I'll come back to you later. And like, that's just how, and I've seen a lot of people turn around from being like annoyed about it to being like, oh, this was amazing. Even if they lose, they're like, that was so easy. Thank you. And it's that customer service, like Bridget said, that I think, it allows you to do that and to engage with them and to talk to them and help them with whatever they need.
I think the other piece, and I say this as someone who's overseen volunteers at events and then also has been joyfully pressed into volunteer service by Kelly for some of our events. One of the things that's so important too is the software volunteer friendly and, frankly, kind of, low tech user proof. Because as the volunteer, when someone comes up and wants to sign in, you want their experience to be good. And if you're staring in absolute fear at this screen, trying to figure out what buttons to push or not push, I think that can be really, really important. So yeah, thinking about those volunteer users as well. Which actually takes us into a really great question that we've gotten from one of our audience members. So this is about working with, if you have a volunteer committee as sort of your event committee. Um, so if they are the ones that are soliciting auction items, although I think this could be, even if it's your staff soliciting the auction items, where does that data live? So where are you putting the information about, that trip, that live auction trip to Aruba or this wonderful pet basket, things like that? So where does the data live, and any other tips or tricks around the auction items? And Kelly, we'll start with you.
I'm going to make Bridget start because she's the one that works with the volunteers. If that's okay with everybody, she's got a better
Absolutely.
finger on this pulse than I do.
Absolutely. Yeah, Bridget.
So um, we try to have it so that it is intuitive, so it doesn't have to be rewritten 4 times to go into the different spots. So, like for instance, in Razor's Edge, you're going to want to know that Sue Smith gave you this trip, and she should get a gift in kind credit for that, right? But in Greater Giving, she might be part of 3 other things that's a package for silent auction. So it's really, and again, I'm calling out Amanda on our team who has done a really good job at structuring what that needs to look like so that the spreadsheet has all the different columns, and then we turn it over to Kelly and she can sort it and do whatever she wants with it. And then really what we end up doing is have it come back almost like in a batch format, so that when you're doing a mail merge, it has all the donor information, and then it literally has a field where it will say like a trip for 5 to Aruba, but it literally says that. So when you do the mail merge, you're not having to customize every single letter. It's just merging it. So I think it's just efficiencies, really, however you structure your intake of the information and making sure it's in a sortable format that it helps for Greater Giving and for Razor's Edge.
Right, because for greater giving, you need it obviously in that software because the auction's being driven out of
Yep.
that. But then for your acknowledgements, it's going into to Razor's Edge. So kind of ultimately living in two places. So Kelly, any other thoughts around that?
No, I agree with how Bridget says. I know it's every organization is a little bit different how they end up getting that information entered into Razor's Edge or into Greater Giving. I know a lot of times there's a spreadsheet that lives out there that has all the information in it. So just making sure that we're thinking about exactly what needs to go in and what needs to be viewed, and also making sure that everything's spelled correctly. That's the one I also see a lot, is making sure that some things are misspelled. So just even if you're like, oh, I've been staring at this for 3 weeks, I can't do it again, hand it off to somebody else, have somebody else look it over just to make sure everything's spelled right.
Good
Yeah,
advice.
yeah, that second or third pair of eyes, never ever a bad idea. All right, we have some other really great questions that actually will dovetail with some of our conversation. So I'm going to sprinkle those in as we go. Um, reconciliation, that word that strikes fear in all of our hearts. Bridget, since you talked about the importance of involving the finance team, we'll start with you. What's the best advice you have for ensuring that the night of revenue, so not so much the sponsorships and things coming in ahead of the event, but that hopefully, hundreds of thousands of dollars that you take in that night um, actually matches what is in the database. So how do you just make sure what are kind of those early steps that you can take to have your reconciliation be a ultimate success?
Yeah, I think the pre-reconciliation several days before the event, so that you know that everything ties out going into the event. So you literally are only dealing with night of. And also what Kelly and I happen to do is use this format called Asana, and we do what's called night of notes. So if Joe Smith happens to want to pay his cash call or his sponsorship or something, whatever it is, with a check that night, then Kelly's putting that in the night of notes. And if somebody tells me something, I'm like, oh, I got to put that in. So we have one place because there's no humanly way possible we can all remember everything on the night of an event, because there's things are coming at us in too many different directions. So making sure you have a platform, whatever it is, to capture any of those night of items. Even like super important where, donors will say, hey, charge my card for silent auction, but I'm going to send you the rest from my donor advised fund. And again, because Kelly's been doing these for so long, I generally don't even have to, when we're going to check the charge cards, I usually don't even have to say, nope, don't charge that one, don't charge that, because she's so used to what our donors do. So that's super helpful. But I would say just knowing going into it, what you're looking at, tracking what you have night of, makes that reconciliation so much easier.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Kelly, what do you
Yeah,
think
those
on?
that and event night notes. I live and die by event night notes. That's the best thing that we do is, and our registration team knows that as well. So you'll be doing checkout, you'll be talking to somebody, and I'll just see a hand come down with a post-it note, and that'll have a note on it that I'll add into Asana. And so they know to write it down so I can put it in. So Bridget and I, when we invariably talk on Monday after the event, we can say this is in here and this we're all set. And also when you have you have your mission moment, you have your cash call, you have all those sheets that include bid numbers or names, however you do it. How we do it, so we take everything back and we enter everything into our software, and then we exchange sheets, so somebody else checks that for you. Sometimes I mix up my 6 and my 9, so it gets all confused, and I just want to make sure somebody else looks it over for me. And so we always just review and make sure that everything looks correct. And I know this may be jumping a little, Marlisa, but I'm going to answer the question about charging cards at the event. So when people check out with us, I always say, we're not going to charge cards tonight. We'll do it Monday or Tuesday, but you'll get a receipt in your email. So we communicate that at checkout. And usually if somebody checks out with me and they have a very large balance or a number at the bottom, I'll always ask too. I'll say, do you want this on your card? And, they'll say yes or no. And then usually if it's like a really large number, I always just make Bridget follow up with them on Monday just to double check. There's some wine, maybe a cocktail. I just want to make sure that this really is okay going on that card. Because if I got that charge, I'd probably be like, oh no.
Yeah, that the attendee regret,
Just want
can
to
be
double
really.
check.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so the question that Kelly is referring to, which was really excellent, was how do you communicate when cards will be charged at an event or after the event? And we recently had a lot of refunds because donors did not disclose also that they wanted to pay with a donor advised fund. So actually, though, that brings up another good question. Bridget, I'm going to target this one specifically to you, because I don't know if you've run into this, but if you've had a donor after the fact say, "Hey, I want to pay for, my sponsorship and auction items and wine pull with a check from my donor advised fund," and some donor advised funds have very specific language on their forms that say, not allowed to do that. So how do you have those sensitive conversations with what's probably a really big donor?
So generally, um, I let the donors do what they want to do. If a donor says to me, nope, this can go through my donor advised fund, I say, well, you know your restrictions, so I'm going to send you what you need. And then if you have questions or they need something else, please let me know. So I don't want to treat them like kids and come off as like disrespectful in any way. So they know what they can and can't do. So however they are structuring it, I leave that up to them. And then if they come back and have to make a modification, then we go ahead and do that and we'll charge it on a card or do something else. I can knock on wood. I think I've had that happen like once where, and it was literally just a miscommunication. The husband gave the credit card and the wife was planning to use the donor advised fund. So it was just a miscommunication and we just issued a refund on the credit card and it was no big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad yeah, I'm knocking wood for you that it's
Yeah,
only
I
been
didn't. I don't know if you guys
that
heard it,
one
but I absolutely did
time.
not.
Talking a little bit about the check-in process, and we were talking about, the kind of ease of that. What's the best way? Oh, we've all been there with this. So you have that wonderful sponsor who's a big sponsor, and they're going to have the table of 10 or two tables of 10. How do you get them to provide the guest info, their names, their email address, their phone number, so that then when those guests show up, their experience can be really smooth. Trying to check in because otherwise, they're just Xerox guest three or AT&T guest number five. So, Bridget, I'll start with you since you might be you're in your staff. Maybe Amanda would be the ones communicating. So, how do you try to wrangle those names and everything out of them?
It is, I will say, and I don't know, Kelly, if you'll agree with me, but we've gotten pretty darn good.
You guys
Like
are.
it is, more rare that we will have, you might have somebody show up and be like, oh, Sue is sick, I go, Ginny's taking her spot, like something like that, which is normal. But I feel like we used to have the biggest challenge with golf tournaments because
Mm.
people would just be like, oh yeah, I'll get a foursome together, just register it. And you're like, oh boy. So we we actually we look at it as an opportunity for additional outreach. So we will start sooner rather than later because you don't want the week leading into the event to be the week that you're doing your outreach to 232 golfers. So we definitely gently prod them to get us the information.
Um, So I think Bridget, I think froze a little bit there, so that's okay. So while she's unfreezing, Kelly, have you seen anything that any clients do either on the front end? So sorry, Bridget, you sort of froze up there a
I
second.
saw that.
Um, but so Kelly, have you seen anything that any of our clients do to kind of ease that process? And then also, is there anything in terms of maybe, form design or things like that that can make it a little easier?
Yeah, I know. You can add, put in your guest names and email addresses as optional, just so that they don't get frustrated with a mandatory, required field, and they all just put guest or TBD or whatever, because that makes it messy as well. A lot of the times for the events where I'm doing the outreach, for some clients, I do the outreach to get the guest names. I send a similar email that says, send me your guests. This is how many guests you have. Send me your guest names, email addresses, phone numbers, meal choices, whatever the questions are. And I always tell them a little bit why we need this information. This ensures a smooth check-in. This is to communicate pre-event information like parking, attire, silent
Mm.
auction. That kind of gives them a why. I'm not going to send my name and email to the stranger. I learned stranger danger. And so I'm not going to do that. They're going to send, I give them a little bit, not a lot, it's not, and they send me a lot of it in there, which is helpful. I think people have gotten better about sending in guest names. Actually, I can't say it's 100%, but it's a lot more than it was a few years ago. I feel like.
That's great. And one of the things that Andrew, who asked this question, pointed out is, of course, as Kelly just said, you're saying to them, oh, well, so we can communicate parking and all that. But really, of course, part of the reason that we want that data is hopefully to convert them into to donors. So, kind of there's the reason that you tell them, and then the reason, of course, that we like that extra data. So very important. I want to talk a little bit more about reconciliation because, of course, it's so much of the process. So, of course, on Monday, it feels like this big looming event because you have so many numbers swirling around, capturing those things, in whether it's Asana, Monday, Trello, and then the post-it notes that Kelly's hand of God is, slapped down onto the computer. Um, so, how can teams kind of break this down into some micro reconciliations? Leading up to the big night. And Bridget, this is what you kind of touched on. So you're not staring at 500 unverified gifts all at once. And then, so there's the leading up to what kinds of things can you do with that pre-reconciliation. But then also, I'm wondering about like post-event, are there ways that you can break it into smaller tasks again, so it's not just this huge eye-popping amount of data that you need to tie out? And Kelly, I'm going to start with you, actually.
Yeah, we've kind of talked a little bit about pre-event, putting stuff on the calendar, having it kind of all listed out, making sure everyone is all pulling in the same direction. We know what we're doing. And I think for post-event, because that's really the overwhelming part. You have all this stuff, your office is a mess. What do I do now? And I think, if you sold, during your event, you did a raffle, you did a live auction, you did a silent auction, reconciling those bits, making sure everything looks, in one database we had, $76,000. How much is in the other one? Making sure those numbers match up. So if looking at it as a whole is too overwhelming, then look at just the smaller pieces of it. And then with any luck, all of that will tie out, and then you have your big number at the very end. So things like that, kind of breaking it down, or if you want to go by date, I know that might be a little bit harder just when deposits come in, but if you are in like, this is all that came in March, this is all that came in April, making sure that those also work out could be helpful as well.
Great. And Bridget, what from your point of view can help, with both pre and post kind of making this less daunting?
Yeah, I think the pre we've covered a lot, so I'll let that one sit. But post, for sure, when you think about anytime you have auction items, if people didn't pick them up that night, or the way that your event is structured, that they have to get it after the fact, I think those are very easy places to start to make sure things tie out. So then you can start your donor outreach for folks to come pick those up. So it's really, again, with Kelly, we kind of batch things by the code. So we'll see like all the sponsorships and all the registrations. And so we can kind of look at that and see that each one is tying out as we go. And then even if there's a little discrepancy, you go back to whatever that category is. You don't have to go through every single thing, and you might be like, oh, we forgot in our night of notes he was paying cash. It usually, when you do it that way, something just jumps out at you very simple, and it's not daunting.
And that actually kind of leads into my next question about, stuff that jumps out at you. Is there anything that, after the event, when you're kind of reviewing everything, what kinds of things jump out at you where you go, wait, this could be a trouble spot, or, this is something we need to focus on and deal with? And sorry, Kelly, I'll start with you.
I'm so sorry. Could you rephrase the question just so
I can rephrase the question.
Thank you.
Sure. So when you're starting to do that post-event reconciliation, what would be some data points or things that might jump out at you that could be potential trouble spots or things you'd want to pay attention to?
Yes, I would say, things that are potential duplicates. Let's say you had a plant in your mission moment, and did we actually have, $25,000 hands? That's awesome. Is that true? Stuff like that, or the business, we have it under a business name. Is it supposed to be under a business? Should be under a person? Those types of things. As um, your donors, and as you work with them longer, kind of that they do similar things pretty much every year with a gala, so you know what you should be looking for if this is incorrect, or who it's under. So those types of things, or making sure that if you have a donor who takes a long time to pay their balance on it, making sure you have that marked or noted someplace, just to routine follow up, like something that is going to, I don't want to say cause problems, but like something that that's going to be a recurring theme over the next few weeks, making sure that you follow up with that person.
Great. And Bridget, what about you? I know you look very closely at your data after the event. So what kinds of things are you either looking for or would jump out at you as potential trouble spots?
I would, very similar to what Kelly said. And then I think the only other thing would be some of those larger numbers, to make sure indeed they did want donor advised, or they did want it charged a certain way. So that would really be the only other thing that I would really pay attention to other than the things that Kelly mentioned.
Great. So we have a really great question from a participant. Um, do you have a toolbox, with a checklist of the types of questions and things that we've been talking about pre and post for the event that for the event from the data team to the event team? So first of all, if you have an organization that's large enough that those are not one and the same, do you have a checklist from the data team to the event team of things to be thinking about? Or if you're a smaller shop, those could be one and the same, but you still love to have those checklists. Bridget, do you have any kind of checklist you work off of every year, or it's just kind of through experience and knowledge?
It's funny. We recently just put together kind of like a process document. So this is where it starts. This is what has to happen. This is when the event happens. So it literally is a type of checklist, but just understanding all the pieces and who's responsible for all the pieces so that everybody fully, again, it's just that whole team buy-in. So everybody is aware of what the expectations are, when they're expected, and then how we can get the most efficient outcomes.
Great. And Kelly, for you, since you're working with this, multiple organizations, do you have any kind of a checklist that you used or anything like that that you think about?
Yeah, in working shape of it all, it's just, what are the same things that we set up for all the different event clients? How does all the different parts and pieces of your event platform, are your registration table or are your registration pages set up? What does the receipts look like? Are your fair market values in there? So I have like a set of, not the same questions, but similar things to make sure that everything gets covered, just so that those parts and pieces get set up. And then the high points of like post reconciliation, pre reconciliation. When do your thank you letters go out? Are you sending out a post event thank you email generally? When do your email receipts go out? Charge cards, those types of big things. But I don't have anything like formally written.
Got it. Great. Thank you. All right, so I want to use these last few minutes to really talk data. And so first of all, when the lights go down or come up and the cleanup is done, so how does the data help you uh, identify maybe those new guests who could have the potential to become long-term donors? And Bridget, I'm going to start with you on that one because you'd certainly be on the lookout for who, of this pool of attendees could really become a long-term friend to the Child Advocacy Center.
Yeah, and I think that's where sometimes we forget how impactful data can be. So it is things like looking at like first time donors or a donor that hasn't attended in a while, and then keeping that list after the fact of pulling that and then taking the time to write a handwritten note and just saying, oh my gosh, we haven't seen you. It was so good to see you. Or maybe depending on what the relationship is, you don't call that out. You just say it was good to see you. Like it just, understanding a little bit and having some sensitivity around that. But the data is really what drives that. So if it's somebody that's brand new, and this is where it's not always about the dollars. It doesn't mean that somebody raised their hand for 50,000 and you don't want to reach out to them. It could also be the person that raised their hand for 500, but they've never been there before, or there's like an interest that they've shared, or maybe they said something to Kelly on the way out, or they said something to me as they were passing by. So it's right back to those night of events, like, oh, make sure to follow up with so and so. So it's really utilizing the tools that we have to, as you said in the beginning, I'm a big relationship person. And just because I rely on data for some of that doesn't mean I just focus on the data. It really is about how to build and cultivate and continue those relationships.
Right. Yeah, the data isn't the relationship. It can just point you in the right direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. Kelly, how about you? What, when you are looking over all of the data that comes in, what might say to you, hey, this is somebody that, the organization should follow up with or has some potential?
I really think if you see there, honestly, if you see their name in multiple places, if they showed up for multiple different events, that type of thing. But I also really agree with what Bridget's talking about the relationship of it all. I thinking of a golf tournament I worked last fall, maybe 2 falls ago, and it was a grandparent of a volunteer. And he was so excited about the mission of the organization, never heard of it, so happy his granddaughter was involved. And he's come back and he's golfed last year. And then I got an email from him asking me if we were doing the tournament again. And I was absolutely, come on down. And so it's that type of thing where having, who knows who's on there and who knows who wants to be involved, but it's just giving the opportunity, having the event, and getting people in the room, all the right people in the right room doing the right thing, I think.
That's excellent. I love that. So we talked a little bit about, engaging with the lapsed and lapsing donors. Of course, an event is a good way to bring them back in. Bridget, when you're thinking about building out your like your invitation list or your save the date list, and you're thinking about like those populations, or so two questions, I guess. What populations do you think about trying to pull out of your database to invite to your event? And then, how much, when you're thinking about an event, are you thinking about engaging past donors, or are you really just kind of thinking about more the bigger success of the event?
So I would say it is definitely event specific. So for gala, there's definitely certain data points that we're going to pull that we want to curate the list in a certain way. And that oftentimes for us is still past donors. It doesn't mean just because you haven't given in the last 3 years or attended an event, there could be a reason for that. So we don't always just like prior year only. We don't always do that. Whereas like our Cheer for Children event, which is really to cultivate younger folks, that might be a totally different way we're looking at how we're pulling lists. Like maybe the threshold for what you give, or even if you are a volunteer, like there's just different ways. So I think it all really goes back to that whole, what do you want from the event? And then like going backwards to build it. So whatever you're trying to accomplish, the database can help you get there, but you have to know what your end goal is first.
That's
Does
really
that make
good.
sense?
It really does, and that's a great way to think about it. I think sometimes, and all of us are guilty of this, well, we're going to invite these groups of people because that's how we've always done it, instead of looking at the story the data is telling you. Kelly, from the many mailing lists that we work on, do you have any other thoughts around kind of data points or things that people should think about when thinking about that pool of invitees?
Um, I think the people who haven't given, like Bridget said, you don't know the reason why they haven't engaged in the last few years. I know I have a golf tournament coming up in the fall, and they had a large donor who kind of fell off, and it was suggested to just invite them as a guest, and they invite them as a guest, and they have come in as a very large sponsor out of nowhere. So you have no idea what could happen if you just invite people to come to something. There's no pressure, no nothing, but maybe they'll be inclined to do it. So I think looking at those folks that used to be part of everything, and trying to get them back. I agree with what Bridget was talking about.
Right. And so I love this question. We've talked so much about the data, and the three of us are huge data and tech nerds. But what's one piece of analog information, like a physical pledge card or a copy of a check, or anything else you can think of that, aside from Kelly's post-it notes? Because of course,
Critical.
that's the most critical thing to keep for that digital reconciliation process later. So what are those things that you still, want to have as a hard copy? And Kelly, I'm gonna start with you on that one.
Cash call sheets are gold. That is the only thing tying that donor to you, to what they said. So that the live auction sheets as well, I think those are huge. Anything that you have, like that you have physical, if you have raffle sheets, if you have just a sheet to write like donations down on, having all of those sheets of paper is super important. I know when I'm working an event and I turn all that back over, I hold on to it all and I turn that back over to Bridget or whoever. I always make sure I take scans of everything on my phone as well, so I have them, so that way Bridget can call me and she have the sheets of paper and I can look on my phone. I said, okay, I'm looking at the same thing that you are. And that way, if I do have questions Monday as I'm working through that reconciliation, those sheets are long gone. They're in somebody's office now, but at least I'm able to keep up with it. But yeah, cash call sheets, I think that's number one.
That's a really, really good one. Bridget, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, from the data standpoint, 100%, always. We want those, we scan them, they go right in the files. And the other thing for us are the volunteer login and log out sheets and the cash bag sheets. So all of those things where you still old school, you still have to sign it, you still have the paper, we scan it in the system and then it becomes electronic, but that's our backup. And that's also like audit trails, things that you need to. So I think that's it.
Mhm. That's great. All right, Bridget, any final thoughts around the data side of events? Anything you think people should really be thinking about this time of year?
I just think the time to start planning your next event is probably in the middle of the event when it's happening. Like it's just there's so many things. We call it here the brain dump, and I'm notorious for having a brain dump document in every single one of our event files because like you just think of the things and when you're doing those wrap meetings, um, don't just do it for your committee members. Like we always, I mean, we include Kelly, we include our marketing people. Like there, there's different perspectives around events. And I think the only way we get better at them is getting better data, but also just listening to other people and understanding different ideas. And so always, I would just say, always be open to that. And a shameless plug, but if you're not using donor database experts, like they are truly one of the top reasons that we are as efficient as we are, and we can focus on the event and the fundraising and not have three people having to do the data and pulling the things and all of that. We can fully rely on you guys to do that and know that the data is accurate, and then we can do what we should be doing. So I think it's those things that are pretty critical to think about.
Wonderful, thank you. And Kelly, how about you? What are your final thoughts that people, should really be thinking about?
And thank you, Bridget, for such kind words. I think thinking about again, what does the week after the event look like? I know you're 6 months out, but what does that next 5 days look like afterwards? I think that's super important just to make sure, because you're going to be exhausted, your hair is going to be on fire. What does that look like? And so that way you don't have to be stressing about Monday. You already have it all written down and you know exactly what you're going to do, and everybody knows what they're going to do. I think would be number one. And I think the other one is super important, is of whatever you are saving in money, you may not be saving in time. So just remembering that as well, that those are what you are giving up. It doesn't always balance. So just thinking about that as well. I think those are important.
Great. And so we're going to wrap up here. And as actually someone just asked, I do want to let you know that we do record these webinars. And if you go to the Donor Database Experts website, you can find all of those there, including our past ones. So yeah, please do go and check those out. And this one is no exception. It will be there. Our next one is going to be on April 21st. And this one is about when to use NXT or Razor's Edge reports, when you want to call in Power BI, because of course that's the new frontier in reporting. So we would love to see you then. And thank you so much for being with us today.
We'll
Take
also
care.
send out an email afterwards with this recording and key takeaways, just so everyone knows.
There you go. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks,
And thank you
Marlisa.
so
Thank
much,
you, Bridget.
Bridget.
Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having me, guys. Take care.
All right, bye.